Ms. Divya, this is Sandesh this side who's managing the live streaming part of it.
Right,
I just wanted to
Sandesh.
understand if you'll be able to help me with how the flow is going to be. Is there a flow of who will be on screen at the beginning, and then is there a flow to this? Or
So we start.
Sure.
Sorry, yeah. So we start with Corinne Demange. She will welcome all the participants.
Sure.
And, you know, from there on, we move to General Bindal. I mean, his address will be there, followed by Dr. Krishna Vats. You know,
So is there someone who will come and introduce each of them, or it is that one after another?
She will be the one. So Corinne starts. She'll introduce Major General Bindal and Dr. Vats. After that, I will take over. Then I will invite Dr. Hugel, Christian Hugel, for his presentation, following which we will have...
One moment.
Yeah.
Vats will invite you after their presentation.
No, but Dr. Vats will not invite me. He's the chief guest. You know, he finishes, and at the moment he ends, I will start.
Okay. So until then, you won't be on camera.
No, until then, I don't need to be on camera. It starts with Corinne, and then we go to Major General Bindal. I think the address for him will be ED NIDM. And then that will be followed by Corinne again, because then she invites Dr. Vats, and then Dr. Vats will talk, and then I come directly in there. Yeah.
Okay. After that, there's a panel discussion between the rest of the speakers together, right?
Yes. After that, no. After that, we start with the presentation from Dr. Christian Hugel. And following that, we will have the panel discussion, which I will moderate, of course.
Okay.
Okay, and WebEx feed, I think Veer just sent a message. WebEx feed will be through NIDM's YouTube channel.
Yes, I checked with Balaji, and he's getting the feed, and we'll make the live on YouTube channel.
Right, great. So he's already getting the feed from this.
Yes.
Great. Hi, Arun. This is Divya here. Great to see you. Can't hear you, Arun. Terry, can you please see? Because there seems to be some issue. We cannot hear Mr. Shrestha's voice.
Hello?
Yes, just heard you. Is that you, Arun?
Yeah, I said hello. So
Yes, I heard you. Yes.
Okay.
Great.
Now you can hear me,
Excellent.
right?
Yes, I can hear you now perfectly. Thank you so much.
Okay, great.
Corinne, do you also want to do a sound check once?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Does it work? Great.
It works. Thank you.
And yes, perfect. Panelists, I don't see yet. Huh? They're not. Dr. Vats and Major General
Dr. Vats and
Bindal
Major
is not.
General not here. No. Arun is here. He's a panelist. And of course, Manfred is already online with us.
Yeah.
Still waiting for others
Hi,
to join
Manfred.
in.
Hi, Corinne.
Hello to everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hello.
Hello, Arun. Yes.
Oh, hello,
Good
Manfred.
to be in contact with you again, and looking very much forward to your interventions as panelists.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for including me. My pleasure. Thank you. So, Divya, if you're there, how much time do each of the panelists get to speak? Hello?
Ms. Divya?
Yeah, I think it was 5 minutes, but Divya, please confirm. I think maybe she's just.
Five minutes, right? Okay. And that would be in one go, or you'll put it in several?
We'll wait for Divya to come and
Okay.
address that. So one.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Thanks.
Hey, Corinne, you were asking me a question?
Yes, she was mentioning it. There's 5 minutes that is left. So Divya, one quick thing. Once all the speakers are here, I would want to give a quick 2-minute briefing on a few things. So if you can confirm once all of them are there, I'll take 1 minute.
Certainly, Sandesh.
So Divya, my question was how much time the panelists will get. So
for each question, anywhere between 4 to 5 minutes is the max we'll be able to offer you. We have, from my side, we'll have about 8 questions. And of course, other than that, we'll also, keep scanning the chat in case something interesting comes there.
Okay.
Right. Good morning, Christina. Thank you so much for joining us. It's very early for you, we know. Christina, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes,
Hi,
we can hear you.
Good
morning.
Morning.
Sorry.
You don't see me, right? I can find a video.
I cannot see you at the moment.
I just want to try the camera, if it's okay.
Yes, please do so. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Good morning, Christian. Thank you so much. We can see you now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Great to have you with us. Thank you so much. What time is it in Peru right now? 5 or 4?
4:26.
You can invite one of our team members once for a seminar and pay it back.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
We will reciprocate.
I'm gonna take notes, names for next contact.
Good afternoon, morning.
Thanks, Christian, for being with us.
Thank you so much, Christian. Sandesh, Christian Hugel will be the one who's making a presentation. So if you can pass on the presentation rights to him afterwards, whenever you have those. He's the only one who's making a presentation, and it'll be great if we can perhaps also test whether he's able to share.
Yes. Yeah, Christian, if you can present your presentation now, you'd want to quickly test if everything is fine from that.
Yes, we'll share this.
Sandesh, you have to give the presenting rights.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you see that?
Excellent. At least I can see it. Can everybody else see?
Yes, but you'll have to go into presentation mode.
Yes.
I have 2 screens, so maybe I need to undo one of the screens.
Click on there's a pop-up which is asking for you to confirm if you've got it.
Yes.
So if you can click on got it.
Can you now see the presentation or the presentation mode? The presenter mode.
It is in the presenter mode.
It's in the presenter mode. Yes.
Slideshow. Yeah.
And now?
Yeah, this is fine. Give us a moment.
This is fine.
Yeah, this is fine. You can stop the screen share if you wish to.
Excellent. Yeah, seems to be working fine.
Okay, I can see.
Yes, you can stop the screen share, Christian.
Yeah, I've seen. I haven't used WebEx for quite a long time, so it's a bit different in terms of screen sharing. But now, okay, it should be okay.
Okay, so one quick thing, Divya and the rest of the speakers here. So you must be seeing a person logged in by the name Studio 3. There's a window which is showing the holding slide of the event. You can right click on it and choose move to stage.
Okay.
When you do that, you will see that is the output that is going to that the audience is seeing where the live streaming is happening for the event platform. So you will see that. Can you switch to the speaker view, please? On the. Did you start it? 1 moment. Okay. So what will happen is when on this holding slide, whenever a speaker is speaking, you will see yourself on this slide. So that is when you know that you're live to the audience. Okay, so a few other important things as I understand.
One second, Sandesh. This was a little confusing. So whoever speaks, they are the ones who have to do that. Go to move stage and
so
click on it.
All of you can.
Every one of us.
Everyone, yes, all of you.
All right. So all of us should do that.
Window. Yes, all of you can right click on that window and choose move to add to stage.
Again,
you say that again. Clear. That was not clear. That was not clear to anyone. Do we have to do that, or we can just stay? Can we just stay as we are?
You can. That is also okay.
Easier.
But if you want to see how is that you're visible to the audience, you can choose to do that. Sure, no problem.
You please take care of that. How we look to the audience, we are fine. We'll live with that.
Sure. So a few quick things. So the flow that I understand now is 1 moment. Ms. Corian will come and do the introduction. She will invite Dr. Brindle. He will do the talk, and then I think Dr. Vatsa will be invited again by Ms. Corian. Post that, immediately after the Vatsa's conversation or the session, Divya will come live. Divya will invite Dr. Christian for his presentation. Christian can do his presentation then. Immediately after that, Divya will come live and call for the panel discussion. So while the first 2 sessions are happening, all of you can be on off camera, except for the speakers who are supposed to be speaking. So rest of you can be off camera, you can be on mute. Only when you're supposed to be on camera, you can simply put on your camera and you'll automatically be visible to the audience. So if you put off your camera, you are not visible to the audience. If you put on your camera, you are visible to the audience. Is that clear?
Sounds good. Thank you. And just to let you know, Sandesh, once the panel discussion ends, Corinne will again come online for the vote of thanks at the end of the event. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So,
just a quick question regarding the panelists. While we are on the panel, should we all keep our cameras on, or just the one who is speaking and the other are switching it off?
Ideally, all of you should be on camera. What we will do is we will show the active speaker on a different window and the panel on a different window. So we will manage that from here. So during the panel discussion, all of you can be on camera.
Thank you. All clear now.
I think we are 2 minutes through. So
yeah,
few
Divya.
hygiene things. Yeah. Yes, good.
No, please go ahead. I was just wondering because I don't see Dr. Watts, not Mr.
Dr.
Bindal.
Suryaprakash.
Good afternoon, Divyaji.
Good afternoon, Dr. Suryaprakash. We're still waiting for.
I wanted to communicate to you. Actually, we had an official meeting just now, and NIDM may take some time. So he said, I may not be able to join timely. He will try, but he may not be able to join immediately.
Can we have his address afterwards then, subsequently?
Yeah, afterwards that.
Does that work?
Afterwards that, he said, I will join. So we can manage afterwards.
Okay. Thank you so much. Terry team, it seems some people are having problems hearing sound, the audio. I don't know why. There's a message from SDC.
Divya, can you help me confirm who's Dr. Brindle here?
Dr. Brindle is not online at the moment.
Okay, should we
He
wait
will
for
join
him
later? Mr. Watts, I already sent him. I sent him a message. I don't see him online. Can you please check in the attendees list also?
Mr. Jose,
madam. No, I checked it right now also. I'll recheck again.
So Dr. Krishna Vats is not there in that by any chance. I sent him an. Corinne, should we start then? Perhaps we can go with Kristen's. Yeah, Maybe we can go
Yes,
already with
I will
Christian's
start.
presentations first.
We will start, and after that I'll introduce the two people, and I say they'll come in a little bit later, and then I hand over to you. Would that work? Or we start, and I directly, without introducing, I give the floor to you.
Yeah, I think we should just start the moment General Bindal and Dr. Krishnavats join. We will, introduce them. I don't see them online at the moment.
So I'm ready to go.
Okay, so I will give you a cue, Ms. Corian. So I will say 3, 2, 1, go. The moment you hear go, you can take a pause of 2 seconds and then start your conversation. Is that okay?
Yes.
One moment.
Dr. Krishnavats is online.
Yes.
Dr. Vatsa, can you put on your camera, please?
Start with Dr. Watts. And
we can
Hi, good
Mr.
afternoon.
Watts?
Oh, yeah,
Good
great.
morning.
Yes, yes.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good
Dr.
afternoon.
Watts.
How are you?
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We have Mr. Major General Bindal is a little bit delayed. So if you agree, if he's not here, I will start with you after me. Would that be fine
sure.
for you?
That's
Thank you.
fine. Absolutely.
Great.
How do you pronounce your surname?
Demange.
Demange.
French.
Okay,
I know it's very difficult. You can call me any name.
Okay.
I'm used to.
So, Ms. Corian, what I will do is I'll give you a cue right now. The moment I say go, you'll be live to the audience.
Yes.
You can set the context, invite Dr. Watts onto the panel. Okay. We're going live. We're going live in 3, 2, 1, go.
Good afternoon, good day, good morning to all of you. Honorable dignitaries, Dr. Krishna Vats, Member, National Disaster Management Authority, India's Ministry of Home Affairs, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, Executive Director, National Institute of Disaster Management. Esteemed panelists, dear ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Government of Switzerland, I would like to welcome you all to today's seminar titled A Fragile Future, Glacial Risks and Resilience in Mountains. This webinar is organized by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, SDC, in partnership with the National Institute of Disaster Management, NIDM, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, as part of the International Adaptation Future Conference. Welcome to you all. Ladies and gentlemen, hardly a year goes by when one does not hear or bear witness to a disaster in the Himalayas, be it the Kedarnath floods of 2013, Srinagar floods of 2014, or the more recent flash floods in North Sikkim in 2020, or the avalanche-triggered debris flow in Chamoli in February 2021. While mountains and hazards are no strangers to each other, climate change is leading to an increased frequency of such events. This was also highlighted in the recently released IPCC report. Today, we all are witnessing the effects of climate change. A rapid and unprecedented glacier melting and changes in snow cover are observed, leading to the development of large lakes in the higher mountain regions, resulting in glacial lake outburst floods, so-called GLOFs. We also observe changes in the precipitation and seasonal patterns, leading to an increase in the number and intensity of flash floods and landslides. Disasters associated with natural hazards do jeopardize people's livelihood, mainly in the mountains, but also often strike people living in adjacent lowlands. This means the research community, the policymakers, and the communities themselves need to better understand the location and the determining factors of changes in the mountain ecosystems, so that we can forecast the onset of hazardous events, so that we can better prepare and act accordingly. We will need to join hands and forces to best mitigate the multiple hazards, and we will need to build robust systems which can forecast the likelihood of events with some degree of uncertainty. This also means we need to invest in the implementation of early warning mechanisms, because these mechanisms, early warning systems, can reduce the exposure and can contribute to a better management of hazards. Given the critical importance of this issue, the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, through its initiative Strengthening Climate Change Adaptation in Himalayas, so-called SCA Himalayas project, is collaborating very closely with the National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA, at national level here in India. SDC is also supporting the governments of Himachal Pradesh, Sikkim, and Uttarakhand to build hands-on capacities for management of flash floods, landslides, and Govt risks, respectively. Within this mandate, SDC brings in a consortium of Swiss experts to develop risk assessment models for flash floods, landslide, and Govt hazards. The project seeks to validate and support the implementation of early warning systems in the 3 states. Another key objective of SDC's mandate behind this partnership and with NDMA is also to undertake an extensive capacity building exercise for flash flood, landslide, and Govt risk modeling, and establishing, maintaining, and operating early warning systems for the sector experts at the state and national level. Ladies and gentlemen, we have with us Dr. Christian Hugel from the University of Zurich as a lead presenter. He will touch upon some of the aspects related to risk resilience through examples of disaster risk efforts across mountain regions. Let me also take this opportunity to introduce our chief guest, Dr. Krishna Vats. Please excuse me. He is a honorable member of the National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA, India's Ministry of Home Affairs. Dr. Vats holds a doctorate degree in disaster risk management from George Washington University, Washington, D.C. He has worked in the area of disaster risk reduction and recovery for the last 25 years. As a career servant, Dr. Vats served as secretary to the government of Maharashtra, and he extensively worked and advised several national and international organizations in the area of disaster risk reduction and recovery. Thank you, Dr. Vats. It's really, it's wonderful that you're joining us today. And I would really like now to give you the floor. Dr. Major General Bindal will join us a little bit later. So Dr. Vats, the floor is yours. Please share your experiences and your thoughts with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to this very important webinar. Thank you to SDC and the NIDM for organizing this event. This is very, very relevant, very topical. We just have concluded a study on Chamoli floods, and we had extensive presentation of the study within the NDMA. So the issues are very, very current, very relevant, and it's getting a lot of attention at the level of policy and planning and programming. I'm sure the webinar will contribute further to this momentum. I think there is a lot of concern about the damage, the hazard and risks in the Himalayan region. You know, and this concern is shared across the spectrum. And this concern arises from 2-3 conditions which are inherent in the Himalayan region. One, of course, is the fragility of the Himalayas. You know, it's a young mountain range. It's very fragile, and we see a lot of activities there in the range. Landslides, flash floods, all those things happening, but all of these things occur due to the fragility of the Himalayas. The second source of vulnerability is remoteness of the people who live in the Himalayas. You know, they live in those regions which are not easily accessible, where they can't get all the services, where they can't get healthcare and many other vital services. So it definitely contributes to the higher level of vulnerability. And the third source of vulnerability is poverty. You know, lack of livelihood opportunities, insufficient income, which contributes to the structural poverty in the region. So poverty, remoteness, and fragility of the mountains, they all of them constitute the complex of vulnerability in the Himalayan region. And this is something that needs to be addressed through our disaster risk reduction efforts. The climate change is, of course, adding to all these issues. You know, it's deepening some of these structural issues. What is happening is that rainfalls pattern is changing. We have very high rainfall in a limited number of days. The temperature also seems to have been increasing, and with this change in rise in temperature and with the higher rainfall, what we see is that there is excessive flooding, flash flooding. We find that the rivers get flooded very soon, very fast, and inundation happens very quickly. So, and also we have also seen an increasing incidence of landslides, rock falls, avalanches, all the hazards that are associated with the mountain regions. And as you mentioned, a number of disasters have happened in the recent past. 2013, of course, was a very, very grim disaster. We lost more than 5,000 people in Kedarnath. But after that, also, we have been experiencing floods and landslides on a regular basis. Recently, you know, in a arid place like Leh, we saw flash floods. So it's clear that the climate change is changing is bringing a change in the risk profile of the Himalayan region. And what we see is that climate hazards and geological hazards tend to converge, you know, and there is not much of difference between these two different kinds of hazards. Landslides happen immediately after heavy rainfall. We also see a lot of disturbances within the region, displacement of the people. You know, there is the hazard escape of the Himalayan region is continuously changing. So there are two ways of addressing these issues. One, of course, is to focus on disaster risk reduction, but at the same time, we need to focus and we need to pay attention to the resilience of the people and communities. Now, if we really want to strengthen the community resilience, then we have to have a a program which includes several components. It's not just about disaster risk reduction. Disaster risk reduction remains an important and essential component of the intervention. But we also need to include livelihoods. We need to diversify livelihoods. We need to improve the livelihoods opportunities. At the same time, we also need to pay more attention to the shelter and housing. People need to build better houses, more robust houses, and the houses which can withstand different kinds of hazards. What is also very important that people have access to renewable energy and people are able to get many services which are dependent on the supply of energy. So it's clear that what we need is a multi-pronged program which addresses several aspects of the people's needs. The conventional DRR program would not be very, very successful in the Himalayan region. And that leads us to the recommendation that the solutions in the Himalayan region cannot be very generic. It's a very big region, very diversified region with a lot of uniqueness to different states, different districts. So each district and each state would have very specific, very different solutions. You mentioned you are working in Uttarakhand, Sikkim. All these states are very different from each other in terms of terrain, communities, hazard escape. So it's not that there should be one approach for the entire Himalayan region. It has to be very diversified, very specific. And that's what, where we are required to work with each state, each district, and we need to find out what really the communities need. We can prepare guidelines and big programs, but unless we are focusing on the micro needs of the people, their specific situation, specific vulnerabilities, we will not be very, very successful. So what we need is a lot of consultations with the people, consultations with the government, local governments, and think of how best the climate change and disaster risk reduction can be addressed. It leads to another very important thing that our interventions must be a combination of disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. They cannot just be one or the other. So we need a very new generation of program which successfully combines this. It has not been a great success across the countries, I would say. So it's a big challenge. How do we bring the disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation together? And we need to discuss a little more what are the different measures, what are the different interventions which really successfully bring climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. What it actually implies is that the environmental measures, the environmental mitigation should also be part of our interventions, which means that our natural resource management be strengthened. That in the Himalayan region, we need to take greater care of rivers and lakes and all the other water bodies. And we also need to improve the plantation cover, the forest cover, and we need to improve the biodiversity. So as I mentioned, there are a new generation of DRR CCA integration, integrated program is needed. For this, I think I would like to mention some of the new initiatives that the government has taken. The government has set up the Mitigation Fund at the national level and the state level. And the Mitigation Fund can be very, very helpful in supporting a wide range of DRR and climate change adaptation programs in the Himalayan region. In addition, the Finance Commission has also allocated huge resources for a mitigation program which focuses on earthquake and landslides. So for all the Himalayan states, there is a specific allocation for dealing with earthquakes and landslides, and I think that would also be a very big help to the region in terms of reducing vulnerability. So in the end, I would like to say that the Himalayan region requires a new approach. It's an approach that should focus on communities, building their resilience, and this resilience should come through a new generation of programs that effectively, successfully combines disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. And this is what we need to focus on. We would like to learn more from the SDC's interventions, and I would like to invite them to give a presentation on their activities in the Himalayan region. And we would be happy to collaborate further on the future interventions in this very important region. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Watz, and thank you very much for stressing the need to enhance the resilience of communities and also to look for context-specific interventions combining DRR and climate change adaptation. And yes, as Switzerland and India, but also the Andes are mountainous countries, I'm sure we will hear later on from the panelists also how they see this merging. I would like now to invite Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, who has joined us, Executive Director NIDM, to deliver his opening remarks. Major General Bindal is presently the Executive Director of the National Institute of Disaster Management under India's Ministry of Home Affairs, with a distinguished service in the Corps of Army Air Defense. Major General Bindal holds advanced degrees in defense and management studies. During his more than 3 decades of service, he has held important command and staff assignments for which he has received accolades. Major General M.K. Bindal served as the Provost Marshal in the United Nations mission in Mozambique. He has been the director of the Center for United Nations Peacekeeping and the secretary of the International Association of Peacekeeping Training Centers. Thank you so much to be with us. Major, you have the floor. Please share your thoughts with us and the audience. We are streaming live as well. It's fantastic. Thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Corinne. Thank you so much for introducing me. First of all, I'm sorry I joined a little late. I got delayed in some other meeting, and we had some guests in the institute. But I listened to the deliberations given by Sri Krishna Vatsaji, member, National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA, Government of India, and it was really impressive, and we learned a lot. I must thank the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, SDC, for collaborating with National Institute of Disaster Management and organizing this program on such an important topic, for which recently we have been seeing 2-3 major events happening in India and in many other places all over the world. And hence, discussing this particular topic at this juncture is very, very important. Professor Surya Prakash Gupta from NIDM, who was instrumental in collaborating with SDC to organize this program, also needs to be commended for this particular theme. This particular issue is gaining prominence more so in the Indian Himalayan region because we are facing critical challenges while coping with the adverse effects of the climate change. The disappearance of the mountain glaciers, expansion of large glacial lakes, and the formation of the new glacial lakes are amongst the most recognizable impacts of the global warming in this environment. And here also lies the seismic zones 4 and 5, which also makes the region highly prone to earthquakes. So this combined with other disturbances such as avalanches, falling boulders, is making the glacial lakes vulnerable to breaches, unleashing sudden, potentially disastrous floods in the nearby communities and downstream. So people residing at considerable distances downstream from unstable glacial lakes are facing serious threats to their lives and property. And flash floods and the Glofs have killed thousands in many parts of the world. And some of the largest events have occurred in the Indian Himalayas, such as the Kedarnath disaster in Uttarakhand, 2013, Parechu river flash floods in Himachal Pradesh, 2005, the recent Chamoli incident. So there are many examples as to why this topic needs more deliberation and more attention. So as a result of all these new events that have taken place, the threat of GLOF is receiving increased attention and awareness for glacial lake monitoring and hazard mitigation, which also has increased significantly over the years, but it is still, there's a lot to be done. For instance, we have moraine-dominated lakes which are located at the snout of a glacier, which has a high probability of breaching with high hazard potential, whereas erosion lakes have also some amount of chances of breaching. So they need to be monitored. And also the floods caused by these breachings pose severe geomorphologic hazards and can create havoc on all man-made structures located along their path. The potentially dangerous lakes can be identified based on the condition of the lakes, the dams, the associated mother glaciers, and the topographic features around the lakes and the glaciers. So the criteria used to identify these lakes are based on field observations, processes and records of past events, geomorphologic and geotechnical characteristics of the lake or the dam, and the surrounding areas and many other physical conditions. So there are many challenges which are coming up because most of the major roads and bridges across all states are threatened by such potentially dangerous lakes, because when they were built, these threats were minimal and now they have increased due to climate change related issues. The threat to the cropland is also greatest in many states like Jammu and Kashmir, Leh Ladakh, Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh. And the threat to the hydropower is the highest in Sikkim. We have a number of dams which are located downstream of a GLOF. So GLOF risk to the population is high in many areas, and it needs to be, there should be risk mitigation measures like what Dr. Krishna Vatsa was mentioning, put in place. But mechanism needs to be put in place. So there should be a lot of measures which can be taken, both short-term, medium-term, and long-term measures, like automated alert services is a short-term measure which needs to be instituted immediately. The question arises, when a GLOF took place, why was the population living downstream to the extent to where it can affect not alerted in time? Why was the monitoring system not able to give out this alert so that adequate precautionary measures could have been taken? So there should be smartphone applications, based applications for reporting, toll-free numbers, which are their dedicated toll-free numbers. Then there should be signages wherever such areas which are vulnerable. There should be standardized signages which should be put so that everyone is used to seeing that signage and taking adequate precautions. Then local mass media needs to be promoted and used so that people can understand the problem in the language they understand. Use of posters, wall paintings, hoardings, competitions. So all these are short-term measures which need to be done immediately because we don't have any more time to lose. Along with that, we need to also think medium term through awareness, through producing a lot of documentaries on the subject and regularly showing it on the television or through Nukkar Natak or theaters and other places. It should become a permanent affair and should become a compulsory affair. Village task force can be constituted and a lot of discussions can be generated. Then crowdsourcing of data for getting to know early warning or getting to know mitigation measures or getting to know the likely pitfalls or the gaps should be encouraged. And already NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, has taken out number of guidance documents, both for GLOF, then LLOF, then landslides, which are very, very extensive in nature. They're in the process of taking out one more document. So I think these documents need to be percolated to the last mile. At the district level, everyone should be made aware of the contents of this document, the utility, and how the issues which have been brought out by the National Disaster Management Authority, how it can be put into practice, how it can be implemented. That's a very important awareness program, capacity building program, which needs to be taken in all areas which are affected by such hazards. Then traditional knowledge, traditional culture, heritage, customs, which have outlived the hazards over centuries, should not be lost sight of. And they need to be captured and included in all policy planning so that time-tested formulas are also incorporated. Then there should be a proper education plan, and it should start from school level. Why only at the community level? In all phases of education, people should be made aware, especially people who are living in the vulnerable areas. They should be made aware. And all the NGOs, all the civil society organizations, all the community organizations, self-help groups, they need to be brought on board to spread, because their reach is covering the last mile connectivity, where they are interacting with the local people. And hence, that is an asset which needs to be tapped and used and taken on board. And their organization, their outreach needs to be also used for the awareness and mitigation preparedness has to be done. Local youth has been found to be very, very effective in such conditions, because they are the first responders. Responding teams, they do come, and only when we have a advanced information. Otherwise, maximum that 0 hour or the first 24 hours response and rescue from neighboring house, from neighboring building, from neighboring village is done by the local youth, and hence they need to be involved in all programs and activities. So awareness drive is very, very important, and there should be creation of trained people, trained medical first aid responders, because they are always a short notice to give first aid or at the field, at in situ first aid. There should be evacuation plans which should be ready. So there should be emergency routes, mock drills need to be carried out, and in which the community is to involve fully, so that everyone knows their role when such a thing happens. And everyone knows if their plan B, when they themselves are affected, whom to approach for to help out in that situation. So I have laid great stress on capacity and awareness generation, because I feel along with technological advancement, like putting in place early warning systems and awareness systems, the usage of such systems and the practical implementation lies with the community, lies with the officials who are going to implement all the steps being taken, and hence they need to be empowered. So those were some issues which I thought I must bring out. So I'm so thankful to you, Corinne, for giving me the opportunity, and thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Major General Bindal, for your important words and for highlighting the importance of managing glacial risks in India. I think you made it very clear that we need to take precautionary measures, but also take actions. And I very much appreciate your message also that the guidelines on gloves, which were released earlier this year, now are taken for implementation, for action, and of course awareness raising. I think here we all agree it has to be done together with the communities. Thank you so much to both of you for important messages. I would like now to hand over to my colleague Divya Kashyap. She is the senior thematic expert at SDC, and she will introduce the lead presenter and then also lead us through the panel discussion. Divya, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Corinne, and thank you, Dr. Watts and Major General Bindal, for joining us this evening. I think there is no two thoughts about the vulnerability of the mountain ecosystems, and they are perhaps one of the most sensitive areas to global warming, facing increasing climate variability related to hazardous processes and resulting in impacts and future risks. And it is in this context that our discussions today are focused on revisiting the reciprocal linkages between disaster risks and sustainable development in mountain areas, including their implications for coping strategies and risk management. It is in this context that I invite now Dr. Christian Hugel from University of Zurich to set the stage for discussions today by sharing his presentation. Dr. Hugel is professor at the Department of Geography in the University of Zurich, where he heads the research group Environment and Climate Impacts, Climate, Impacts, Risks and Adaptation, or known as ECLIM. His expertise is in the interdisciplinary climate change research with focus on climate impacts, risks and adaptation, in particular in the mountain regions and the cryosphere, and of course related natural hazards and water resource issues. He has been the lead author for the 5th and the 6th assessment report of the IPCC and has led several international scientific commissions across the world. Christian Hugel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Divya. I'm trying to share the screen now. Second. I hope this is well visible for all of you. Okay, good.
Yes, it is.
Dear colleagues, dear participant panelists and attendees, it's a pleasure to take a few minutes with you on reflecting on experiences and future perspectives of glacier risks. I acknowledge also my co-authors here, Simon Allen, Holger Frey, Hashim Sattar. Now, our perception of disasters in general and glacier disasters is very much shaped by single disaster events, and I here take the example of the recent February 2021 Chamoli disaster, very complex event, one of the a big event, unfortunately also a very tragic event that has had many casualties, about 200 casualties. It's very important to understand this event to better prepare and better manage such risks. However, we should also look at greater times and greater space and look at the trends in disaster. These are not exclusive glacial disasters, but disasters in mountain channel study we did some years ago, and also a basis for current IPCC report. So this is the region, the Himalaya region, and this is the number of disasters. When it gets to more red, it's the high number of disasters, and you see how these disasters develop over time and space. So it's a general an increase of disasters, and also if you look here at the blue line, which marks the Hindu Kush Himalaya region, you also see this increase of disaster events. However, the drivers are important to understand, and I can tell you one of the most important drivers is increasing exposure of people and assets. Climate change is also a factor in this, of course. Now, how is this changing? The high mountain regions are rapidly changing, and you can see it on this presentation and visualization of Swiss glacier in central Swiss Switzerland, the Aletsch Glacier, the biggest glacier in the Alps. It's a projection how a glacier retreat and new lakes form as glacier retreat. So we see this is a very dynamic landscape which is rapidly changing, and of course this has also implications for hazards and risks. And I just want to make this point that why glacial lakes are actually really important. Rock avalanches, ice avalanches usually have a certain reach. However, if they impact, for instance, on lakes, lakes are and floods are extremely mobile, so they can extend the reach of the disasters quite considerably down to areas where people live, even in urban areas. Now, how we tackle them, it's very important that we have well-developed methods and procedures in place. And I just would like to mention here the Joint Commission, International Commission of the IX and IPA on glacial and permafrost hazards, where we have done a major effort in developing hazard assessment guidelines for this region. These guidelines have recently, as it has already been mentioned, developed in a very fruitful process with NIDM for national guidelines for India. I also would like to remind us, if we talk about glacial disasters, that this is very much related to the concept of the IPCC of risk, and which of course is also beyond the IPCC, where risk is composed as a hazard, vulnerability, and exposure. And you can see also this on this graphic. Now, it's very important, if we talk about managing these risks, that we address all components of risk. And I will briefly go through a number of aspects related to this component to show you why this is important. One of the examples here for the hazard components, actually really this is the climatic influence, the climate change component. As glacier retreat, this lake Palcacocha, a very iconic, important lake in Peru, you see graphically how this has developed, and also on the right side how strongly the area and the volume have increased over the past 20 and 30 years. So these developments need to be monitored, of course, and analyzed. Now, for the assessment, this is an example for the South Lunak case lake in Sikkim, a work we currently involved with colleagues also of Geotest and University of Geneva, with a number of institutions, of course, in India and SDC. So really procedure, this is now using numerical computer models to assess the flood depth and velocity, and eventually also the level of hazard. The exposure component, as I said, this is considered in general as one of the major drivers of increase in disasters. This is example again from Peru. This is in 1941. Lake outburst from Lake Palcacocha and destruction of parts of the city of Huaraz. It is an ancient air photo. And now look how this has developed into the recent city of Huaraz. And as you can see, there's a very strong urban development exactly in the area of the ancient flood affected area. This is, of course, unfortunate, but there's a number of processes of political, economic, and social processes behind that, without going into details here. Now, as an overview, it's also important to, for instance, for the national level, and we have here this recent study we did on cloth hazard and exposure for the Indian Himalayan region, can be an important basis and support for risk management planning. You see here these different components: growth, hazard, exposure, and risk, which highlight the hotspot regions and lakes in the Indian Himalaya as a basis for further planning. Now then we as having developed this basis, we can move into action. And action, we have a number of different options for risk management. And we structured this into a reduction of hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. I don't have the time to go here into detail. We also distinguish between short-term actions and long-term actions. I will briefly go through a number of structural measures which are usually made in place for reduction of hazards, but also very important are reduction of exposure and vulnerability, including early warning, and of course also land use planning and a number of other options. Now this is, for instance, at the lake. Peru has also a history of great work since already more than 50 years. Siphoning, for instance, is one of the short-term measurements that had also been done in Switzerland, and reinforcement of the dam outlet, which has also been shown, for instance, in the siphoning pumping in South Lunak Lake, also Inja Lake or Chorolpa are examples. Then also from Switzerland, this is from colleagues of Geotest, really structural work on the glacier. This is very complex and challenging work on the ice, and is sometimes also causing a lot of cost. Is really one of the most challenging things you can do if you don't have any other options. Or here from Monte Rosa region, something I was involved very much in the past. And on the right, just to show you that it's really very important, as we are in these high mountain regions, not to look isolated in an isolated way on the lakes, but really the whole dynamic environment with which is getting increasingly unstable. So these are more the structural measures to reduce the hazards. However, as I mentioned, there are very important options and measures for reducing vulnerability and exposure. Warning, evacuation, and early warning systems are very important to reduce the exposure of people, especially. Also very effective is land use planning. I would say it would be very effective, but unfortunately it's also very challenging and complex because of social and political barriers and challenges, but it's a very important measure. So concluding this of course was an extremely short overview of experiences that are available. I think it's important to emphasize that glaciated high mountain regions undergo rapid changes and really beyond historical evidence, which implies new and changing hazards and risks. We really need to be aware of this. Then we do have a number of international and national guidelines to support systematic procedures of these future-oriented assessments. Several countries, including Switzerland and many others as well, have long-standing experience in managing glacial risk. And we have so also in Switzerland for quite a lot of time, I would say until the 90s, the focus on structural measures has been quite strong. Now, present-day approaches address all risk components, and I think it's really important that we design and apply a wider range of measures that are tailored to and negotiated with the local social, economic, and political context. And that's something that we really have also now from the IPCC report. We have clear evidence that local population stakeholders need to be integrated, and this is making eventually the risk management much more successful. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Christian, for sharing your thoughts, especially touching upon aspects related to risk as well as risk management for various disasters in the mountain regions. Your presentation, of course, provides us a starting point for our discussions today. We are very, very fortunate to have with us a panel of very distinguished experts with extensive experience in disaster risk management from mountain regions across the world. Before we launch into this discussion, of course, may I just invite the participants that in case you have any questions, please feel free to post them into take advantage of the chat facility, post them there. We will try to take up the questions posted there, but because of the time limitations, please bear with us in case we are not able to address them. May I start by introducing, I think, Ms. Silvina Cristina Rodriguez Valare. She's a Director of Climate Change Adaptation and Desertification in Ministry of Environment in Government of Peru since 2017. She's an economist with a master's degree in environmental economics from University of York and sustainable development from University of Rotterdam. She has extensive professional experience in the formulation of and evaluation of public investment projects and implementation of policies in disaster risk management, as well as adaptation to climate change. I go next to Dr. Surya Prakash, who is Professor and Head of Geometeorological Risk Management Division, Cyber and Industrial Risk Management Division, and Chemical, Biological, Radiological, and Nuclear Materials at the National Institute for Disaster Management. He's a renowned expert in the field of earth sciences, and his key areas of interest are landslides, avalanches, earthquakes, gulfs and dam bursts, mining disasters, and of course, he focuses also on community-based disaster risk management. May I also invite Dr. Arun Bhagat Shresht. He's the Regional Program Manager, River Basins and Cryosphere Program at International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, or ICIMOD. Dr. Shresht has a PhD in Earth Sciences from American University of New Hampshire and a Master's in Hydraulic Engineering from the former USSR. Before joining ICIMOD, Dr. Shresht worked for Nepal government, Department of Hydrology and Meteorology. His main areas of experts include climate change, glaciers, glacial hazards, glacial risk mitigation, atmospheric environment, and hydrological modeling. He has several publications to his name. Last but not the least, I also would like to introduce my colleague, Dr. Manfred Kaufmann, who's a program manager with the Global Program Climate Change and Environment. At the SDC, Dr. Kaufmann is managing projects on climate change adaptation, most of them with specific focus on glaciology, integrated water resources management, and disaster risk reduction in mountainous areas across many parts of the world. With a PhD in soil sciences from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, he started his career in a Swiss engineering and environmental consultancy company and focused a lot on environmental impact assessment studies for major construction projects. Last but not least, Dr. Professor Hugel will also, of course, be there for taking up any questions from the audience as well. Of course, due to the paucity of time, I request panelists to try and respond to the questions addressed to them within 4 to 5 minutes, as far as possible. If we look at, the discussions today, there are, of course, and also in the media around us, the advocates for the stronger involvement and use of science to inform policy and decision-making within and across all sectors at all levels in order to enhance resilience of mountain communities. But of course, despite the enhanced occurrence of events like gulfs and related debris flows, thawing permafrost and increasing number of rock avalanches, there is little expertise or rather restrictions there in terms of available through which we can manage the effect of these processes and their impacts on society. May I start by asking Dr. Hugel, how can these existing gaps between glacial research and disaster risk management be overcome?
Yeah, thank you, Divya, for the question. I think this is really very important, and I think we have a number of initiatives and networks where we can advance this. I mean, and one of the things is actually just the current IPCC report, which is really an organization. It's a so-called boundary organization between the science and the policy. And this is the report was already published, and the second one will be in February. So this will be, of course, this is a bit on a higher level, usually at the international, national levels, but I think it's also really taking into account the local level. So we need to have this basis of engaging together science and different actors from policy and practice. And I think actually the way of the projects we've often engaged with the Swiss Corporation and different institutions, for instance, in India or in other countries as well. I think this is really the way forward. We need to exchange, we need to discuss and see based, I mean, really convinced that we should act based on scientific and other types of knowledges, of course. This is important that we also take into account that, for instance, local knowledges that are around, so that we basically produce something together, which is often called co-production of knowledge, which is then, and there's empirical evidence that this approach is having seeing much more success than sort of more isolated approaches. So basically, I think we are on the right track, but we probably need to reinforce and strengthen these lines which we are working already.
Thank you so much, Christian. I must also mention here that in the chat, we already have one question for you. Perhaps if you can already take a look and respond to it, that'll be fantastic. Thank you so much. We also, of course, know that disaster risk is one of the key impediments for sustainable development of mountain regions. And mountain regions which lack disaster risk management capacities will face more severe impacts of climate change. So to reduce the impact, the risk of disasters, it is urgent to increase awareness and to develop integrated strategies and policies on this particular topic at the national level and as well as at times at the regional level. In this context, may I reach out to Ms. Rodriguez, to ask you that what, in your view, are the three most important elements to enhance the understanding of the policy and decision makers regarding the risks faced by mountain communities due to glacial disasters?
Good morning or good evening to all participants. And first, I would like to thank for the invitation to the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation and the National Institute of Disaster Management of Ministry of Home Affairs from the Government of India. Before to respond this question, I would like to give a little brief context of Peru. Of course, one of the most tangible effects of climate change globally is without any doubt the glacier retreat. And in Peru, the loss of glacier surface in the last 50 years is 53%. Christian show us some picture of this impacts, and this represents the accelerated retreat of tropical glaciers. In this period, Peru's most glaciated mountain range, we call Cordillera Blanca, has registered 40% loss of glacier surface. Also, the National Glacier Inventory in 2018 has quantified the number of lagoons of glacier origin in more than 8,000 and estimate new lagoons formation in 11 other mountain range, being the grading numbers in one mountain range in 117 more. So this inventory serve as a basis for monitoring the evolution of these future lagoons, which will be an important source of water in watershed involved, but also represent risk scenarios for the population and living in the lower part of watersheds. In Peru, in the north, central and south, we've seen already impacts related to decrease in water availability and different regions that impact, of course, cities, agriculture activities, agro-industrial projects of national importance, as well as hydroelectric power plants. For all these reasons, we identify as elements of challenge the ability of reliable information, and second, its dissemination to decision makers and communities. More science and research, as Kristen just showed, in mountain areas is needed to provide a more accurate understanding of the disaster and water shortage risk that Andean communities and urban population will face soon and in the future. Also, it is relevant to promote dialogue between science and policymakers to ensure decision based on reliable data and measurement. Finally, this process of increasing awareness and dissemination of information to communities is key. This involves a transformation of the highly technical language into a simple and easy one that the population can understand and incorporate in their daily life. As a result, communities can participate more actively in the decision-making process and be part of the solution and sustainability of these actions. So this is the key element that I would like to emphasize now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christina. I perhaps also take this question to Dr. Surya Prakash, who is professor with the National Institute for Disaster Management, to hear on the same topic from the perspective of Government of India. Dr. Surya Prakash.
Thank you, Divaji. Am I audible? So my congrats to you for organizing this program jointly with us and giving us this opportunity. And I've listened to Christian Hogel several times. It's a pleasure to always listen to him, and his expertise in the area is very much appreciable. So what I would questions you have posed, I would suggest three elements which you have asked. The first element is in DRR, we always talk about HVCRA. That means hazard, vulnerability, capacity, and risk assessment. Whether it is GLOF, landslide, LOF, or any other disaster, this is very, very important. And to bring the attention of the policy and decision makers, we have to also come out with a worst case scenario, along with the past records of the events, so that we become more credible and reliable for them. And this is the first step that we need to take up as scientists or experts in those mountainous areas. So I dealt with these disasters since 1990s. So several of them I have seen, including Leh, Srinagar, as well as the Kedarnath and Uttarakhand. So many I have seen. So these need to be actually well documented. And not only do we need information and assessments, but we also need solutions. And particularly the nature-based solutions, which will include the potential prevention, mitigation, and preparedness measures that need to be taken up to address those problems or to reduce the consequences of those worst case scenarios. The third part is, which has been well emphasized during the recent event which happened on 7th February 2021, early warning and communication, including the last mile connectivity in these areas, along with expected actions, is very, very important. And we are now working on those, and case studies from Sikkim are likely to give some inputs in those directions. Do I need to give the answer for the second question? Okay, thank you. I think that this is enough for this first question.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Surya Prakash. Of course, what you have mentioned, that there is a need, of course, to focus on integrated, actionable, and fit for purpose, measures, including early warning systems and predictive services, which are very important components. But many responsible agencies, of course, there is a plethora of solutions out there more are getting developed. But of course, agencies in affected countries struggle to find ways for prioritizing their resources in the study and management of these high mountain ecosystems. I go back to Christina here, to ask that how can governments work towards bringing about convergence in their development agenda, climate action, and disaster risk management in the mountain areas?
Well, thank you for this interesting question. In general, a strong institutional arrangement, as well as multi-sectoral, multi-level, and multi-stakeholder participation, must be in the sustainable development agenda now under a context of green economic recovery. Our vision as a Peruvian state is to ensure that the country reduce the level of climate risk in population, ecosystem, goods, and services, and that it can be achieved is carbon neutrality by the year 2050. Peru has since 2018 154 measures identified to achieve its national determined contribution, or NDC, under the Paris Agreement. 92 of this group correspond to adaptation measures in 5 priority areas: water, farming, forest, fishing, and aquaculture, and health. And I would like to highlight that these measures were identified and prioritized not by the Ministry of Environment, by 13 ministers and the National Center for Strategic Planning, and are being recognized by regional governments and other actors, such as the private sectors or other organizations. And also, since to the framework law of climate change approved in 2018, the effective implementation of NDC is supported by at least 3 bodies now. The High-Level Commission on Climate Change, which is chaired by the Prime Minister and is made up of 13 ministers and representatives of regional and local governments. Second, we have a National Commission on Climate Change made up of sectors and representative of non-governmental groups such as private sector, indigenous population, universities, women, young, youth. And third, we have also a platform of indigenous population and climate change that provides ideas and ancestral insights to be considered in a climate action. And why I'm talking about this NDC, it is because amongst the adaptation measure, we have at least 3 directly related with glacial retreat, mountain areas, and other measures that are more indirectly. For instance, we have the implementation and NDC as the implementation of early warning systems for flow, landslides, and other glacier hazards. These measures involve a joint work between different institutions, for example, the National Water Authority, the National Institute for Research on Glacier and Mountain Ecosystem, our National Service of Meteorology, and the National Institute of Civil Defense, among others. And also another measure related to this topic is the implementation of interventions related to water harvesting for water security, mainly in agriculture. This is under the responsibility of the Ministry of Agrarian Development and Irrigation, along with local and regional authorities. As we see, Peru is working on measures to adapt to climate change in mountain areas and facing the challenge and opportunity of climate change with multi-sector, multi-level, and multi-stakeholder involvement. One of our roles as a Ministry of Environment is to promote and to provide technical support to those responsible of NDC implementation, and to do it and do it considering urgency and ambition. For example, during the elaboration of the national policies of disaster risk management, and also the national policy of glacier and mountain ecosystem in Peru, we work together with other competent sectors and actors to incorporate joint actions on adaptation to climate change, disaster risk management, and development in these policies. So therefore, and finally, I would like to remark that the participation and engagement of all actors are the core axis to hold the Peruvian climate change framework together with cross-cutting approaches like gender, interculturality, education, science, and technology. So all these elements are also key to bring this conversion between development, climate change, and disaster risk management. So far, that's my participation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christina. Really appreciate your responses here. Perhaps I'll just move a little bit further and, touch upon a little issue of, need for also at this point of time for strong regional frameworks to address transboundary nature of disasters, especially when we look at how mountain regions, and I think HKH is no stranger to these issues here. I reach out to Dr. Arun Shrestha here, just to ask about his thoughts on how can robust regional cooperation frameworks strengthen capacities for disaster risk management. Arun.
Thank you, Dibya, and thank you for inviting. Great pleasure. Now, we have discussed about the context, the stock of glaciers present in this region and how it is, kind of changing and what could be the challenges, right? What are the challenges we are already facing and what we could face coming future. Now, what I would like to say is that the complexity becomes even more complex in the context of transboundary. Right, particularly if the transboundary context is international transboundary context, right? So what happens in this context, just to start with, is that, the boundary actually divides one biophysical entity artificially into, let's say, upstream and downstream part. And in most of the cases, particularly in Hindu-Kush-Himalaya region, South Asia, uh, you cannot have a very detailed information about how the hazard situation is evolving and changing in the upstream part. And also from upstream perspective, there is not much understanding or appreciation of the risk scenario in the downstream part, right? Now, why it happens, it's mainly because in general, there is a lack of a mechanism for sharing information, sharing data, so on and so forth. So under those contexts, I think having some sort of transboundary cooperation framework is very important. Now, when we talk about transboundary cooperation framework, it could be many different kinds of frameworks, right? The first and foremost probably would be a framework having a strong legal setting, which is based on certain legal arrangements and having a very formal governance mechanism, which we also call, track one kind of cooperation framework. Now, those who have worked here in this region, we realize the kind of sensitivities and how difficult it is. So the readiness of governments in this region for that kind of framework, perhaps for the time being, is questionable. So therefore, I think the alternative probably is to think of some other kind of frameworks. And from our own experience from ECMOD, we have been working on what we call knowledge networks. For example, in Upper Indus Basin, we have this Upper Indus Basin network between the 4 riparian countries. And in Koshi, which is shared by China, Nepal, and India, we have Koshi DRR knowledge hub, specifically on working on the DRR, right? And then we have also in this region example of Brahmaputra dialogue. Basically, these are what we call the science diplomacy kind of efforts, and it could be track 2 or track 3 approach, which we know is less sensitive, but then it actually works in most cases. And through those networks, through those platforms, we can do joint research, and through which we can get some sort of information about upstream and downstream. And if things get good, if the traction is better, then, there are examples of many resilience solutions being, implemented, like early warning system and other structural or non-structural solution. And even some sort of informal information sharing would actually benefit and, avert a lot of loss of lives. Example of Yagong in 2000, when a landslide outburst actually created a lot of damage and death in India because there was no information. And the similar kind of case, but of Parichu in 2004, but when the information was shared, there was no loss of life, right? That actually tells what is the difference of having information and having no information. So this is what I would think would be a working kind of modality for the time being. And this kind of track 2, track 3 knowledge network actually can create building blocks, foundation for more robust, more legally binding cooperation in the future. Now, to wind up, I would just like to give one example of our current engagement with support from SDC in Upper Kosi Basin, the Transboundary Cooperation Project, which we are actually implementing the entry phase right now, and hopefully we'll get to the main phase later on, where we are working, ISI mode with Nepal and India institutions in risk assessment and possibility of risk, minimization at a later stage. The Kosi DRR Knowledge Hub and its Transboundary Working Group on GLOF, landslides, erosion, and sedimentation have been a real good kind of basis to jumpstart with the partnership. This technical working group has actually created a trust among the institutions and experts. So that has led to cooperation with, for example, IMHE in China, and that has really helped in embarking on this in this project. So this is one example of how knowledge network can actually help in reducing disaster risks in this region. So with that, I will stop for the time being, and maybe if there are other issues, I can come back. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Arun. Really appreciate your response. I now move to my colleague, Manfred Kaufmann. Manfred, Switzerland has a strong commitment to disaster risk reduction and its integration into sustainable development and, of course, climate change adaptation strategies, especially from the perspective of addressing vulnerability and exposure of communities living in these regions. So just want to hear from you that how can agencies like SDC contribute towards strengthening capacities for disaster preparedness of their partner countries? Manfred.
Thank you very much, Divya, for this important question. I would like to answer it with reference to the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction and its 4 priorities, and show how SDC can contribute with its intervention holistically to address all these 4 priorities together. Priority 1 of the Sendai framework is understanding disaster risk. I think we can all agree that you can only manage what you know. Hence, disaster risk management starts with the understanding of disaster risks, including hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. And only if you have this knowledge, then you can use it for the planning of prevention, mitigation, preparedness, and response measures. Now, I want to share some practical interventions of SDC. For instance, in Central Asia, we contribute to the strengthening of the monitoring systems. Monitoring of essential climate variables in mountains is sparse in many regions, and especially in Central Asia. And the cryospheric variables, glaciers, snow, and permafrost are so far almost not monitored. So we support national hydromet agencies in the setup of respective monitoring systems. And what is very important, we try not to build up parallel systems, but embed new elements in the existing systems. Through that, we also developed the capacities of national hydromet systems and universities to autonomously operate and maintain these systems, which is very important for sustainable use of it. And then, last but not least, which is a thing which is very important, we also develop capacities to use the data that we obtain and to translate them into specific climate services. That means into some actionable knowledge for policymakers or other beneficiaries. A second example is the risk and vulnerability mapping, which we have supported in India. So here we supported the development of a common framework for risk and vulnerability mapping through consultative processes involving all 12 Indian Himalayan states. And I would like to take reference to what Krishna Vatsa said before. He said everything is context specific, which is of course absolutely true. But at the same time, it is important that we use the same framework for the assessment, so that we have to make the same basis for informed and transparent decisions on planning of specific adaptation measures. Third example is the training of the next generation of scientists in glaciology. For instance, we have developed in an Indo-Swiss capacity building program a glaciology curriculum, which is provided as online courses. And it's also used by the Himalayan University Consortium, which is managed by ISIMO, by the way. And then we give also specific trainings, for instance, for young female researchers. We have launched a program, Women and Ice in Central Asia, which helps to promote a career in geoscience for young female future researchers. Then priority 2, which is strengthening disaster risk governance to manage disaster risks. Here, I want to make reference to the guidelines on the management of Govt that have already been introduced by Christian Huckel in his presentation. They look into disaster risk management from a very specific hazard, that's the Govt, but they provide a very integrated approach for managing Govt risks, from the assessment to prevention and response. And most importantly, they embed the scientific and the technological approaches in the overarching legal and institutional framework, and they define also the roles of the different stakeholders. So even if it's quite technical, they help to strengthen the overall risk governance sector in this specific topic. To send out priority 3, which is investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience, SDC, of course, has a lot of multilateral support to development banks, to the Green Climate Fund, Adaptation Fund, and other organizations. So that's where the big money is going to. But then on the national level, SDC partners with national disaster management authorities for the implementation of pilot projects. We do that in several countries. But for instance, in India, and that's again something which has been presented by Professor Huckel, we have a project for the planning and implementation of monitoring and early warning systems for Govt, flash floods, and landslides in several Indian Himalayan states. And what is here very important, it is to use Swiss expertise for the designing and implementation of such systems, which is very valuable. In this project, funding is actually not the primary focus, as the installation costs are by and large covered by the Indian government partners. So it's really like a joint implementation, and it's like the learning by doing approach. We also have, for instance, in another project, which is called Adaptation at Altitude, we have launched a solutions portal for adaptation solutions in mountain areas globally. And here we share lessons learned. On priority 4, enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response, I just want to highlight one thing that we do together with the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery. And this is about supporting them in the development of tools for planning under climate uncertainty. I think this is very important, and this is an additional driver for disaster risks in the future. And countries need to be informed on what might happen in the future because of climate change. So we want to help them in planning under climate uncertainty, which also includes cost-benefit analysis of what works best. So in summary, we give a lot of emphasis to partnerships with local and national stakeholders. We do a lot of capacity building, both on the scientific level as well as with government stakeholders. We always try to use a holistic approach of disaster risk management, and we focus on community resilience. People are at the center, and they are not only seen as beneficiaries, but as important stakeholders in the planning process. That's in a nutshell what we're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Manfred. Really, I mean, appreciate, thoughts of everybody on this particular topic. I have exactly 1 minute to close this meeting. We were told very strictly to stick to the deadline of 4:30 because there's a next event planned, in the same on the same links, it seems. I once again take this moment to thank every single one of you, so very kindly to join us today and sharing your thoughts. Unfortunately, we did not have, the time to take this discussion forward, have a more intensive discussion on certain emerging topics, but perhaps in another platform, we do that again. That's all from my side. Not sure if Corinne is there, but
there, and I'm visible, and I just can say thank you so much, Dhanyavad, gracias, herzlichen Dank. A truly international exchange of knowledge, very much appreciated, and that's how it should be, the International Adaptations Future Conference. Thank you very much for all of you, and I wish you a very good evening.
Bye.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.